So last session we discussed about how do we create an application. So Angular workspace, setting up the Angular workspace and creating Angular application. So I hope everyone able to do that, right? Installed Angular, you installed Angular and Angular workspace and application, everything fine? So Angular 11 projects. We created this workspace and the application. Everyone able to do that, right? No issues in creating workspace and application. Huh? Yep. Fine. Right. So now once we are ready with the application and workspace, yesterday we discussed about the file system of workspace, what workspace contains. And after we created an application, you can see, so we have a projects folder. In that, Amazon is the project. Amazon is the project. And once we run that project, yeah, so you log on into admin mode. You just open the programs here. You don't know how to run programs in admin mode. Right click on your Visual Studio Code in programs and select run as administrator, right? That will run in admin mode. Understood, Mr. Anand? Right click on your Visual Studio Code and run as administrator. So now today we need to understand how we can deal with the application architecture and its file system, application related file system. So yesterday we created an application, a project. So we have a workspace. In the workspace, we created a project, and that is Amazon. Now in this project, you can see that a folder is created, projects, in that Amazon. In that Amazon, you have some files, folders. So what are the folders and files present in this Amazon folder? What are the files and folders present in this Amazon folder? You can observe the files present in Amazon folder. That means application. You can see we have E2E, a first folder. You can see E2E. So E2E, E2E stands for end-to-end actually. It is a end-to-end configuration folder. It contains the source files for setting up environment for end-to-end testing actually. End-to-end testing. That means, so testing related, all the source files, testing configuration related all source files are defined here, are defined in the E2E actually. E2E stands for end-to-end, end-to-end. So you can observe currently in E2E, you have TS config, protractor, SRC, and you see app E2E spec. Actually, these are all the files you will able to understand once you know about testing it. Generally, E2E contains all the files that are used to configure the testing environment, for end-to-end testing environment. That means on development test mode, on quality test mode. So these all from development to production. So all the testing related environments are configured here actually. These you will able to understand. So once we finish our designing of application and learn about testing. So E2E comprises of the configuration of testing environment for our application, which is used for testing the functions. You can simply say that it is used for unit testing the application. Unit testing means each and every function will be tested. So testing related, all the configurations for different environments are defined in E2E, which we will not require now. Later and at the end, we will require this E2E, right? Next, you have a SRC folder. So SRC is the source folder for root level application. This SRC contains all the dynamic and non-dynamic files that are required for your application. Entire application related source files are present here. Dynamic files means scripts, files and all. Non-dynamic means static files like images and all, images, PDF documents, everything, help documents, all are present in this SRC. So your application related, all files are present inside this SRC. So whatever you need for building an application, so everything is present inside this SRC. We will go into it and see what it contains. So testing related configurations are in E2E. Application related resources are in SRC. SRC contains all application resources. Okay. And you can see there is a browsers list RC. You can see there is a browsers list RC. This is a special file which is used to configure the target browser and the Node.js versions for different front-end tools actually. That means this browsers list.rc, it is used to configure the target browser. That means browsers list, what are the browsers supported for this application. You can restrict browsers. That means you can say that, so this is suitable for only specific browser. You can restrict this application so that its library is not loaded for any specific browser. So browsers list defines what are the browsers supported for the application. What are the browsers supported for application? So it shows the list of the browsers supported for application. And the configuration of the browsers. Everything is defined inside this. You can restrict browsers, right? And the Karma config. Karma is a testing framework. Karma is a testing framework. Actually, you have testing related framework, Karma Jasmine installed in your Angular. So to do testing related files are present in E2E. That means configuration files are present in E2E. Framework related configuration is present inside this Karma. That means importing the library, loading the framework, starting the testing, all this managed by Karma config. From where to get the library, so what library is required, everything is defined in this Karma config file. So Karma configuration, it sets up the platform for testing. That means it runs the tests, configures the tests and everything. And important is E2E contains all the files required for end-to-end integrations. That means end-to-end testing, end-to-end testing. But testing started, testing is executed, testing environment platform is set from this karma config file, right? This file is responsible for starting up your tests and running the tests. So tests executed, test started from this karma config.js. So it contains the information about what library to use for testing and where to run the tests and show. All such things are defined in this karma config. So this all you can see in testing. And you already have tsconfig.json. You already have the tsconfig.json file, right? One second. Right. Now, so karma config, it is used to start the application, right? It is used for starting the application. Means testing up, starting the testing in application, right? These testing things you will see towards the end once we start learning about testing. tsconfig already we learned yesterday. tsconfig and tslint, they are present outside also, you can see. That means this is tsconfig and tslint for this project. Every project can have separate rules for TypeScript. All projects can have common rules for projects. That means all projects can have common rules that are defined in tslint and tsjson of workspace. tslint and tsjson of Amazon project, that means it is only for this project, only for this project. So, and you observe here, so tsconfig, this is application related config file. And the spec is anywhere you see the file spec, that means it is the test file. So whatever you written in this app file, which you can test it by using the spec file. That means it is the testing file. Test files are given with the name spec actually, spec.spec.json or .spec.ts like that. So that means whenever you're designing a component, for every component there will be a test file. For every component, usually there will be a test file actually. That's what actually the point is. So this is generally how we can define and configure these options. So nothing much. So you have E2E, SRC, browsers list, karma config, and tslint and tsjson. Now our application related, all the resources are present in SRC. So this is important for us. All the details about these files, I will give you in the note. You can go through that. Right. Now, all application related SRC source files are present in this SRC. Now you can see that SRC contains some more folders and files inside it. Without understanding these, you cannot understand how Angular application starts actually. So it's very important to understand the infrastructure. It is very important to understand infrastructure. So without knowing about this, you cannot start application. You don't know where to start with, right? That's the reason these are important. So all your application related resources are present in SRC. It is the main folder actually for us. In SRC, you can see, so first we have an app folder. App folder contains application logic. So it comprises of entire application logic, application related logic. That means app is the folder in SRC, we have an app folder. It comprises of application logic. Usually Angular application comprises of components, so services, pipes, and factories, all these are defined inside this app. Application related entire logic is present in this app folder, and logic is maintained in components, services, so pipes, factories, and so on. So we will have directives, modules, so many things. So app contains the application related logic. Assets comprises of static files like images, some PDF documents, some text documents. All these static files are present inside these assets. So for your project, you want to keep any static files, you need to keep them in assets. So it is configured with the static files. Assets contains all your static files. And we have environment. Environment is nothing but entire development process actually comprises of build information for development, quality, and production. Actually, building information for development server, quality server, and production server. Build configuration for entire application is defined inside this environment. It is defined inside this environment. Build configuration is defined in environment. Obviously, you might have learned a basic thing. So without knowing static page, dynamic page, you can't be a basic HTML or web developer. Am I right now? Static files. So that is a very common thing. What is your HTML? Is it static or dynamic? Rajkumar. Right. So that doesn't require any compilation. It is not handling any interaction, which just serve the content. Those are static. Huh? Right. So here, yes. Now, that's a very general thing, right? So that means they doesn't require any compiling, processing. They are just served as they are present. Understood? Right. And environments contains, you can see environment contains build information for all environments. Environments contain environment. Environments contain build information for all environments. Build information for all environments. Build information for all environments. It contains the build information for all environments. Build information means actually when you build an application, so where the target files need to be copied. So where the target scripts need to be kept. So what configuration should be for the files? So for building the application, actually we build application, already I told you one point, like entire software development happens in 4 servers. I told you that. So we will have a sandbox server. Entire development happens in 4 servers usually. So we usually have a sandbox server. And we have a development server. We have a quality server, and we have a production server. I hope everyone knows this general development approach, right? So we have sandbox server, we have development server, we have quality server. So we have production server. Entire development happens in these servers: sandbox, development, quality, and production. So sandbox is the repository server. So sandbox is the repository server. Whatever the library that you need for your application, that is kept inside the sandbox server. That means whatever library you need for building application, so that is kept in the sandbox server, Now what we do is we bring this library from the sandbox server, from the repository server, and we build application. Usually we build application. So we build application in the development server. Application is built in the development server. We build application in the development server. After building the application, then we move this application to the quality server. And from the quality server, in the quality server, testing happens. And from the quality server, we move to production. And this is given to the client. That means client will be using our application. So client will be using the application from the production server. That means you need to build your application for development, for quality, and finally for production also. That means we need to build our application. So when you are building the application, you need to configure where the files need to be copied, in which format they need to be copied. A lot of configuration options will be there. You will learn that when we learn how to build applications. So you have to build for development, you have to build for quality, and we have to build for production. And when you are building for development, quality, production, some changes will be there. It will not be in the same way. That means when we build for development, we keep all the resources at one place. So the files will be in a separate format. For example, suppose when you are building, so your JavaScript files will be some .js. And when you are making it into production, your JavaScript file will be demo.min.js. I hope everybody knows that. That means when you are building for an application, the files, the configurations will change for every server. Those are defined inside this environments. In the environments, all the configuration is defined. Like for building, that means is it ready for production? So current environment is production environment or development environment. So where to keep the information? So when to provide for production, all such configurations are defined here. Currently, there are no settings written here. We will write them. We will define the configurations here when we are building actually. So when you are building an application for development, quality, and production environments, so all the configurations are defined here. It is done according to the configurations defined here actually. That is environments. Fav icon, usually fav icon means every website will have a favorite icon. That is that favorite icon. Your application have favorite icon. Favorite icon is displayed in the title bar. You know that, right? And index.html, it is the startup page. That means your application starts with this index page. Your application is starting with this index page, starting in the index page. That means whatever the output you are watching when you start the application, let's start this application. See, so ng serve project is equal to Amazon. So we are starting that application. So when we are starting the application, whatever the initial output that you see on the screen, it is actually coming from, so that is actually coming from this index.html. But actual architecture I will explain later. For example, so the flow I will tell you. So you have SRC folder. In the SRC folder, you will have an in the SRC folder you will have an app folder. So in the app folder, usually we will have in the app folder, usually we will have components. Entire Angular application is built with components, which you will learn detailedly. Don't worry, I'm explaining the flow. Entire Angular application is designed with components. Suppose, so home is a component, about is a component, contact is a component, some login is a component, register is a component. Every functionality is given like a component. Actually, every component comprises of HTML and TypeScript and CSS. That means it contains, every component is like a template. So it contains a presentation, logic, and effects also. Entire Angular application is built with components. And very important is these components will not directly run. Our application starts with a file called index.html. In this index.html, these components are accessed. So your application starts with index.html, but index.html, suppose we have this index.html. This index.html will not directly contain anything. It will import these components and use those components. So by default, in the index.html, you will have a component called AppRoot. That is the component. You will have a component called AppRoot. That means actually in our components in Angular application, I told you home, register, login, and all this. By default, Angular will give you a component called app component. So by default, you can remove it, you can keep any components, whatever you want. By default, Angular application comes with app component. This app component is accessed by using a selector called AppRoot. Suppose you have a login component and you can access it as app login like this. You have a home component, you can access by app home like this. You can access by using this mechanism. So by default actually, so this app component is accessed here. So index page is the startup page, but it will not directly contain the content. It will just contain the reference for component. That component comes here and display. That is why it is called single page application, SPA. Why it is single page application? Because user will stay on only one page from begin to end of application, that is index page. Onto the index page, all these contents will come. That means user will stay on only one page and he can access everything on that page. Generally, if it is not a single page application, user clicks login, it will navigate from index to login page. So login to register page like that. So the point is, in single page application, user will stay on only one page and everything is accessed from that page. So that is the single page. But directly everything is not designed in this page. So it gets information from the components that are present in your app folder. So index page, you see application started successfully. Okay, application started successfully, fine. Now let's open here. So when I open here, you can see I am typing here HTTP :/localhost and its port number. Already it showed that port number is 4200. You can run on a different port number also. I will tell you later, we will learn all the commands step by step. So 4200, then hit enter. So by default, it starts that application. Whatever you are currently watching on the screen, it is coming from index page. Let's go. Now, when I go to index page, you can see that index page is quite simple here. Very simple index page. In the body, have you observed? It has only one simple tag. And you see in the body, lot of things are there. Now, the question is, in the body, it is having only one tag. But generally in the output, you can see lot of things. Now, from where all this information is coming actually? So that means the body is using a root component. Actually, that root component is app component. Observe carefully in your app folder, in the app folder, there is an app component. You can see there is an app component. App component TypeScript file, app component testing file, app component CSS file, app component HTML file. So 4 files are present. This is one default component that comes. You can delete it, you can keep your own component also. What is a component? What are the files required for component? These we are going to detailedly learn. Don't worry about that. Detailedly we are going to discuss complete infrastructure. We are going to add our own components manually. Here by default one component is there, and that component, observe here, app component. So this is the selector for the app component. That means app root. That is being used in your index page. That is being used in your index page. That means index page is starting with a component called app root. So whatever the output you see on index page is not actually designed in index page. It is coming from a component. Which component? App component. So usually where will be the app component related presentation? Presentation means it will be in HTML. Go to HTML. You can see now lot of design is there. This is all designed. This is all designed in the app component HTML. That is the reason this output you can see in this way. Now I will clean all this, delete everything. I will just put a heading. So I will just put a div, and I will keep this div align. So to center, align to center, and just keep a heading. And here I will say that Amazon shopping, Amazon shopping. Just I given this message. I deleted everything. Now once you save this, automatically it will be compiled, it will be processed, and output is generated, and you can see your output is ready. That means the screen that you are watching is index page, but the design is not directly in index page. It is coming from component. So what is a component? How to design the components? This we are going to discuss detailedly. So index page is the startup page for your application. Application starts with index page, and you are using a single page application. Application starts with only one page, and user will stay on only one page. Everything comes onto this page in the form of components. That's what you are going to learn, how to build this kind of environment, right? So index is the startup page, but in index page you see there is nothing designed. It contains only a component. You have to go to the component HTML and make changes. Then that will be reflected there. Later you will learn how to access the components, design the components, use the components, add our own components, and work with them initially. So this is app folder, assets folder, environments, favicon, index.html, index.html. Next you can see in the next you have main.ts, main.ts. Anywhere in any technology in the world, so main means, what do you say? Main is called as, you have a specific technical term, na? What do you say? Main is called as in any computer programming technologies, main is called as, what do you call main as? You know it, main is called as, what is the technical term we use? Entry point. Main is called as entry point. Understood? Main is called as entry point. Technically, main is entry point. That means this main.ts is the main entry point of your application. This is the location from where your application compiles. So it configures the compiler for your application. It creates a chunk that compiles and converts the static DOM into dynamic DOM. So that means generally, I already told you. So here, generally, so main is the entry point. Main is the entry point. Entry point. This is the location from where the compilation happens. This is the location from where entire process compiles and handles. This is the location from where everything happens. Everything happens. That means it compiles the application, process the application, the configuration for the compilers are defined here. Actually, our Angular is using two types of compilers. We have a JIT compiler and a AOT compiler. JIT is just in time compiler, just in time compiler, just in time compiler. And AOT is ahead of time compiler, ahead of time compiler. The difference between these compilers, you will gradually see that, but I will tell you, the main configures, the main.ts, it contains all the configurations to start your application, And usually it uses all the platform, everything is configured here. That means it loads your application, compiles your application, runs your application. The application architecture, I will tell you. So it is responsible for compiling, building, and processing and generating the output. It is the entry point for your application. And it uses two compilers actually, just-in-time compiler and ahead-of-time compiler. What is the difference between these two compilers is, remember, these are interview-related questions. So in interviews, majority of Angular interviews, even at experience level also, several questions are asked relative to the file system, right? So because in Angular, if anybody asks what is a component, what is a filter, what is a pipe, everybody can answer them. Architecturally, they have to test your experience levels. That is the reason architecturally so many questions are asked in interviews, especially in Angular. Interview means for experienced people, architecturally questions are very much asked. So you need to be very strong in that. So the regular popular question in interview is what is JIT and what is ahead of time. Actually, ahead of time is available in Angular from Angular 9. They integrated ahead of time. In Angular 9, they integrated ahead of time. Prior to that, Angular uses JIT compiler, JIT, just-in-time compile. What is difference between just-in-time and ahead of time? Difference is nothing but just-in-time. What it will do is it will load library. It will load library into browser and compile in browser and compile in browser. It will compile the library in browser. So that means now it will take little more time because it has to be compiled in the browser. It gives some burden to the browser. Now we have a new compiler ahead of time. This will compile all your logic and it will run in browser, That means before it goes to the browser, it is compiled on your server. That means on the server, it will compile on application server, everything compiles, runs. Finally, only the library is sent to execute on the browser. That means it is compiled before it reaches the browser. Are you going to compile in browser? Are you going to compile before it reaches the browser? That depends on what kind of content you are delivering to the client. So you can use both compilers. At certain situations, you can use a JIT, so you can use AOT. By default, AOT is enabled in Angular 9 and higher versions. Angular 8 below versions, so they use a JIT compiler. Externally, we have to install AOT actually. Now AOT is internally available. This is the compiler you have to know. So Angular compiles with the two types of compilers, JIT and AOT. JIT is compiling in the browser. So, and AOT is compiling before it reaches the browser. That will be more fast, performs better. That is what actually the compilers that are used at the time of compiling your application by the main, right? So that is very important. These points you need to know. So currently by default, we have AOT and JIT, AOT compiler enabled actually. How do we enable the compilers? You will see where to configure them. Another important in the file system, that is the entry point. That is the entry point, main. Another important in interviews, they ask the question, what is polyfills? Polyfills.js. What is polyfills? Remember, these are 100 to 100. You can see that out of 100 Angular interviews, 99% Angular interviews, you will find these questions. So what is polyfills? What is AOT? So you have to know about them. Polyfills is used for differential loading. It provides scripts for the browser support. That means it uses a concept called differential loading. Differential loading. This is also asked in interviews. What is differential loading? Differential loading is a technique. So already I told you in the features. Differential loading is a technique which loads the library according to the browser. That means I told you that library is classified into two, legacy library, modern library. So if any browser is an old version browser, which is a legacy browser, which understands only HTML4 and ES4, then it is a legacy browser. Then it cannot understand the new features that you have developed. Then it has to load only what is understandable to that browser. So now in Angular, the library is classified into two. One is legacy library, another one is modern library. According to the request, so from where the request is coming. If request is coming from an old version legacy type browser, then it will send the legacy library. So if it is coming from a modern browser, then it will send the modern library. So polyfills is responsible for handling differential loading. That is the answer you have to give. Differential loading is a mechanism where library will be classified according to browser. Library will be legacy and modern. For old versions, it will send legacy, and for the new versions, it will send the modern. That is what actually polyfills contains. Polyfills comprises of. That means based on the browsers, it will import, it will compile, it will run. It will verify, is the browser version more than this or not. So if according to the browser version, according to the browser compatibility, it will load the library and it will execute it. So that's what actually polyfills does. And this is very important. And the styles.css is nothing but it contains the global styles used for your application. For example, in the output you see, this is looking like this. So it is a div and a heading. So it is looking like this. And what I will do now is here in the styles, global styles. That means here I will write some styles. Wherever heading is there, suppose I said, so background color some maroon, so like this, and so color say white, and say text align to center, so some padding as some 10 pixels like this. And you can see that, so these are the global styles, it will be affected everywhere. That means whatever the changes you made, those need to be affected everywhere. Now important is here, so these are affected. So but the key point is the styles that you have defined here, you can see in the index.html, this is the app component here, app component.ts HTML. Yeah, this is heading 1 we have defined there, not heading 2, right? We will use heading 2. Okay, now Now those effects need to be applied for the content and display here. That means the global styles, whatever the global styles, so for your application you can configure here. Remember, every component have its own styles. So you can define some global styles. Globally, how the appearance should be. You can configure that. That's what actually styles.css. Here it also allows us to import styles from other files and use them, which you will see. How to use Bootstrap and all other styles, I will show you how we can handle that. Right. So that is one. And test.cs, it is the entry point for testing. So here a little bit confusion for the people, why there are so many things for testing. You can see that actually, so E2E contains the files that are required for testing. Second, so karma config.js contains the framework configuration which is required for testing. But testing starts from where? Testing starts from test.ts. That means test.ts is responsible for compiling your code, executing the tests, running the tests, and showing the results. Is test passed or failed? So entry point for testing is test.ts. Configuration of testing is done in karma config.js. The files for the testing is maintained in E2E. So that means configuration files are maintained in E2E. So we have three different options. One is to maintain the configuration files. Another one is to import the library and define the library. Another one is to start the test. So configuration is done in E2E, and importing library is done in karma config, and the starting of test is done in test.ts. It contains the information for starting your test, configuring your test, and running the test. Right? So in this currently, we don't need to worry about testing and all other things. In this currently, we need to first understand about this app component. That means we have to understand about this app folder. That means we need to start learning and building from this app. So that means now, according to what you have seen, so what is the starting point? What is the starting point? What is the starting point for building? So building an application, building an Angular application. The starting point for building an application is designing components. These components are accessed and used in index.html. So the starting point in Angular is designing the components. We have to start designing the components, and these components are accessed and used in the page. Now for that, first you need to understand the Angular architecture. You need to understand the Angular architecture. That means how do we start the Angular application? How the Angular application works. The complete infrastructure of Angular application you need to know. How it starts, how it compiles, how it runs. The architecture of Angular application. So then the first thing you will learn after understanding architecture is designing the components. So designing components is the starting step. Already I showed you a basic, like, so app contains component. In that we make some changes, and that component is being used in the index page. So building Angular application is starting with designing the components. So majority of entire design is through these components only. So first what we need to understand is how application works. The file system, what are the files available here? Now we need to start building the application. That means first we have to design components, and we need to learn how to design the components, where to keep the components and configure them. So that we will see in our next session, right? So that we will see in our next session. And tomorrow, so tomorrow, no off, we will have a session tomorrow. So, and tomorrow we will understand the Angular architecture. Tomorrow we will understand the Angular architecture, means functionality, and we will start building the application now. That means practically starting working with Angular application building. That we'll see tomorrow, right? Tomorrow we have session, right? Yeah. Once go through the command, because it is not the command ng new create application. It is not the command ng new create application. Once go through that command. So it is ng new directly application name. If you want to create an application, ng new workspace. So go through the commands once I given in the notes, Manohar. You don't know favorite icons, sir. You know HTML, Rohit? You know HTML? Yeah. You know link tagger? You know link shortcut icons, sir? Don't know? That is called favorite icon. Na? Shortcut icons are favorite icons. Huh? Got it? Huh? Favorite icons means when you open Google, Google logo will come in the title bar. Facebook logo will come in the title bar. Those are favorite icons. Huh? That's a very basic HTML. Hmm? Uh,